Hello boys and girls, this is Mater here. Today we're talking about the newest brush truck that we have added to our arsenal here at East Fork, the Model 34. This is a 2018 HME Model 34E Type 3 brush truck. The chassis is an International 7400 series 4-wheel drive 4-door crew cab. It's actually been the same cabin chassis that HME's been using for the last 12 years. It's powered by a 540 cubic inch 8.9 liter Cummins inline 6-cylinder turbo diesel. Produces about 350 horsepower at 2,000 RPMs. The transmission is an Allison E3000 automatic transmission that also drives a Darley PTO that operates the Darley JMP 500 two-stage pump, which is the same setup that we have in Brush 7. It provides pressure to every discharge on the truck, including the 150-foot booster line and the two 2.5-inch discharges found on the brush. One is at the engineer's panel and one is on the rear. The auxiliary pump is the pump and roll option and is powered by a Kubota 3-cylinder diesel engine and is completely independent from the stationary Darley pump. It's found on top of the brush truck and provides pressure to all the 1.5-inch discharges and the 150-foot booster line, but it does not provide pressure to the 2.5 discharges. So it's the same basic concept as what we have with Brush 7. The brush truck is 110 inches tall. It's got a wheelbase of 183 inches, which is 13 inches longer than our Model 14s. The gross vehicle weight rating is 35,000 pounds. The truck and water alone weighs 27,000 pounds, which gives us about 8,000 pounds of room for gear and personnel and so on. It comes with a 500-gallon water tank, has 2 fill ports. One's at the engineer's panel and the other is in the rear. It has a 20-gallon foam tank with an easy fill foam system that is located at the engineer's panel, and we'll go over that later in our training exercise. It has a 75-gallon saddle tank on the street side, and in front of the fuel tank is the 15-gallon DEF or diesel exhaust fluid tank. There's also a fuel gauge for the DEF fluid on the instrument panel. The auxiliary pump controls can be easily found at both the engineer's panel and inside the cab. You can see them because they're on the gray panel that's on the engineer's panel. Both of them have a primer button that will allow you to prime the pump even before exiting the cab. There are 2 switch controls for the Foam Pro system. One is inside the cab and the other is at the engineer's panel. This will allow you to turn the foam on inside the cab, but your percentage will have to be preset from the engineer's panel. The Darley pump is controlled by an FRC or Pump Boss controller found on the engineer's panel. This device acts like a governor for the pump and will monitor discharge pressures as well as the engine temp, oil pressure, voltage, engine and pump hours. The device can be either put in pressure mode or RPM mode depending on operational need. It also has a preset pressure at 100 psi when you're operating in pressure mode. So now let's take a quick look at each compartment. This little compartment right here is the engineer compartment, and what's going to be in here is all of your fittings and your couplings, your rubber bands, all the accessories that the engineer is going to need to do his operation. And then back here, if you go past the engineer panel, the first cabinet here is going to be the engineer's compartment, where you can see his SEBA will be there. He's got his toolbox, he's got his fill hose, he's got his gate valve. There's other tool components, the spare shorty hoses, the road flares, and all the accessory fluids for the brush truck will be held in this compartment. This compartment will also house the engineer's web gear and any of his personal items that he'll have on the assignment. This compartment here is the tool compartment. This will be housing all of the tools with the exception of the irons, and we'll show that here in just a little bit. All of the tool compartment is it's been totally reorganized and designed, and it's housing 2 new Rogue hose in here, as well as the new saws that will be moving in here shortly once this brush truck goes into service. It will also house the fusees and all of the fuel storage that is on the materials list for the Type 3s here at East Fork. So here we are on the rear of the brush truck. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to start high, and I'll show you that the left compartment there is completely empty. That is going to be housing your red bags, any accessory gear. Also the cooler that we have inside the cab will fit in there if we need to move it out of the cab. This is a 2.5-inch discharge on the rear. This is the inch and a half pre-connect. As you can see, that's the 200-foot structure cross lay that we have in there, and to the left of it is our 2.5-inch fill hose. There's 250 feet of 2.5 fill hose on this brush truck. Looking down here, this is a rear intake. It's a direct fill for the brush truck, and then the compartment here houses all of our NAS packs and all of our accessory hoses. So we have 800 feet of 1.5 inch and 500 feet of 1 inch in there with all the extra T's and couplings that we need to make 3 more NAS packs. As you can see, we also have room here that we could make accommodations and put the cooler there too as a third option. Moving along over here, this is the ladder rack where we have a 20-foot 3-fly ladder. There's a special compartment there that houses the backboard, and we have a couple of pike poles that will be coming in the future. One other thing I wanted to note here is these tools right here are used for our wildland structure protection. They will slide in here and be the hooks on the rear of the brush truck. They're kept neatly right inside the inside of the cab door. Okay, this compartment here we left open, as you can see. This is going to be housing the web gear, structure gear for the other 2 or 3, including the captain, depending on what the assignment is and what the size of the crew is. So this is going to be solely for storage of personal gear. Okay. Moving on up here, this is the compartment that houses the other 3 SCBAs, along with the irons and a salvage cover. So anything structure related will be in this cabinet. Okay. This compartment here is solely for the EMS cabinet. And as you can see, we put one of the blue first out bags in there just for so you can understand that we're in the process of getting these bags in service for all of our Type 3s in the district. So we'll be able to have a first out bag, and we'll have an AED, and we'll have a O2 bottle in this compartment alone. This compartment is totally separate from the rest of the brush truck, so it doesn't need to be ventilated. Okay. So here we are on top of the brush truck, just to give you a quick glimpse of looking down, see what we have up here. Here's the booster line that we have. It also has the rollers to go to both sides if you need to run the booster line to the passenger side. And remember, the booster line is 150 feet long. This is the access to the auxiliary pump and the 3-cylinder Kubota, so you can check the fluid levels and so on. It's a 150 GPM pump. Comes out of the rear of the motor. All the plumbing goes straight down from there. This is the first coffin up top, and as you can see in here, what we did was we carried all of our extra water, Gatorade, MREs. We have 10 gallons of spare foam, and we have the 3 bladder packs up here. And as you can see, we still have a lot of room in there for additional storage of other equipment. And like I was telling you before, this hose bed is going to remain empty. This is going to be utilized for your red bags. It's actually plenty big for you to put 4 of the new True North bags side by side, and room for the cooler that's inside the cab if you choose to take it out of the cab. Here in the center is the access for the water tank, all of the controls for the foam tank, and in here we also house our portable pump and the hard suction hose in this little storage compartment here. And then this is one last look of the hose bed. Again, that's 250 feet of 2.5 inch. Still has room on the top if needed to carry any additional storage. And that's everything on the top of the brush truck. Okay, and lastly, we have 2 extra storage cabinets on top on both sides. As you can see, it's for the 3 sections of hard suction, and in here you'll see one section is 8 foot. This one's a shorty, and on the end is a foot valve strainer that we have already mounted onto the hard suction hose. This one houses 2 of the lengths, and then over on this side, you can see this is the 3rd length, and then this here is the storage for the hose for the easy foam system. And we'll do a quick demonstration on how that operates over at the engineer panel. Okay, now I'm going to demonstrate real quick how the operation goes for the easy fill foam system. The foam system fill was designed so that guys weren't having to take the 5-gallon buckets up because this rig is so high to store them up top. Now I understand we have 10 gallons up top, but those are only going to be used in case of an emergency. If you're out in the field and you completely run out of foam, then you use those. But if you have the ability to fill the foam system from on the ground when you get back to camp or what have you to get the foam, that would be the best way. So you're going to need your hose and a bucket of foam. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pull the 2 pins that hold the cap in place, and then both of the wing nuts on these is a locking mechanism that pulls the cap off. Then you're going to put the hose in place, pull the wings in place to lock it in. It also has its own pins to actually lock it in place, but I'm not going to do that for you for this. So then you're going to open your bucket. You're going to make sure that the strainer end is clean and it's intact, and you're going to stick it in your bucket. Now, it's already got a pre-designated control to let it know whenever the tank is full. So it should only just take a couple of gallons to top it off, okay? It's a 20-gallon foam system. So what you do with the battery on is that you just push the button for fill, and the foam starts to get sucked out of the bucket going up to the tank. Okay, once it registers that the tank is full, it automatically shuts off. Now, when you get to this point, what you want to do is you want to dump all the rest of the foam out of your line back into your bucket. Before taking your hose off. Then you're going to take this hose off. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Before you do that, what you want to do is you want to flush your line. So what you'll do is you'll take this and put it into a water source, whether it be a pond or a porta tank or whatever, stick it in, and then you're going to push the flush button. Okay? And the flush button will allow water to be sucked up through here, and it just cleans your hose out. Okay? That concludes this demonstration of how to work the easy foam system for the brush truck. So up here in the bumper, as you can see, we have 2 separate discharges that are independent from each other. And what we have is 2 hose beds for each one of them. And what we have now is we have a 20-foot length, not a 15, of 1 3/4 structure hose that we're going to try for the shorty lines on this brush truck. Doing a little test process to see how those work. This will be the chain storage compartment for you for the tow chain. And the second hose bed with the second line, and they all both have independent ball valves inside the bumper. So that pretty much concludes this short version of the basic concept of the brush truck. Now let's get started on how the operation is with the auxiliary pump. Okay, so we're going to do the pump and roll evolution with the new Model 34. So we come down to a little dirt lot here. Remember, you want to make sure you're on dirt before you engage the 4-wheel drive. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to go to neutral. You're going to set the brake. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start the auxiliary pump from here. Turning on the ignition. Firing it up until you hear that alarm go off. See that you get pressure on your gauge. Okay, so there's a couple of things that the engineer needs to check at the engineer panel, so we'll meet back there and I'll show you what those are. Okay, the things that you got to check while your firefighter is getting your line out and he's getting his webbing on is you're going to come back and make sure that your tank to pump valve is open. It's an air actuated valve. You want to make sure that your tank fill valve is closed, and you want to make sure that your foam percentage is set at the proper. You don't have to turn it on because you can turn it on from inside the cab. Also make sure that your pressure gauge here reads the same as what you do in the cab, which we do. Okay, so now we're going to go back into the cab and start our operation. Okay, we're back in the cab. We're getting ready to go off-road. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to put your foot on the brake. You're going to switch your transfer to low. You're going to switch your front axle on. You're going to turn your fan override switch on. All right. So then you're going to disengage your brake. You're going to go into low range, low 1. You're going to make your pressure settings. For your discharge pressure with his line, it's going to be 80 psi. All right. You give him the sign. Trying to keep a nice loop in the line. Now remember, these front lines are 20 feet long instead of the 15 feet, inch and a half lines. We're using structure lines. It's a little bit heavier. It's a little bit thicker. It's more durable. So these are going to be just a test and see how they work. Mainly we changed the length of the hose because of the height of this brush truck. So that you have a better ability to watch your firefighter as he's got his line stretched out doing his operation. Also, always remember, a good thing to practice is writing down your time and mileage on your windshield when you start to go off-road doing a mobile operation, and watch your tank level. Also at this time, if we wanted to use foam, we have a foam switch here to turn on if that was the desire. You already have your preset out at the engineer panel. If you need to change your pressure or your percentage, you'll have to stop operations and go out and change the percentage at the engineer panel. Remember, you have a 500-gallon tank and he's flowing a 60 GPM nozzle, so you can do the math to see if he's doing a continuous flow, how long you have before you actually have to consider to get more water. Always try to keep 25% in your tank for emergency reserve. Okay, a couple of things to keep in mind after you're done with a pump and roll operation is, number one, make sure you take the pressure off the foam side of the pump. Make sure you flush the line out really good and do your 360 and check the duals to make sure you don't have any rocks or any debris or anything stuck up underneath the carriage. Okay, so now we're going to do the stationary pumping with the Darley pump. So we're going to our assigned location, and once you mark on scene, you're going to go to neutral. You're going to set the brake, and then the PTO shift is right here on the console. It's a quick flip and a toggle up, which engages the pump. And you're going to turn your fan override switch before you leave the cab, and now we'll meet out at the engineer panel. Okay, so we're here at the engineer panel. I've chalked my wheel, and so now we're going to talk a little bit about the pump boss. Okay, it's a governed system. It's on this brush truck, so once you get out of the cab and you engage the pump box takes over. So you have both the pressure mode and the RPM mode. Remember that if you want to set your own discharge pressure, you go to RPM mode, and you can set whatever pressure that you want. But when you go into pressure mode, you can push your preset button. Your preset is set at 100 psi. So it's going to govern your discharge pressure to 100 psi. So let me show you. If I open the tank fill and it drops pressure, you hear it pick up RPMs because it's trying to compensate. Just like you see on the engine 7, 12, 14. Okay? So it's self-governing, a little bit different than what we're used to on the brush stroke, okay? Excuse me, on brush saddle. So now, what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that the tank to pump is open. All right, you're going to pull prime. Yes, the same primer that we use for the auxiliary pump is the same primer we use for the Darling. Okay, so now we're in pressure mode for this operation. Now we're going to flow some water. I'm going to hook this line up to the discharge here. I'm going to go to the preset 100 psi. Ready for water? Okay, now our firefighter is going to be flowing water. And you see that it's maintaining 100 psi on the discharge. So if we're starting to run multiple lines, the pump boss is actually going to compensate and make the appropriate adjustments to maintain that 100 psi. If you want more pressure, what you want to do is you want to go to RPM mode. Okay, let's say we want to go to 140. Then you're going to go back to pressure mode after you get to your discharge pressure. Just like the governors that we have on the engines in the district, it's the same basic concept. So if you want to increase it and maintain a higher pressure, go to RPM mode, make the adjustments, then go back to pressure mode. Okay, now what we're going to show you is how to do a quick changeover if you're ever in that situation, okay? There's two intakes on this brush truck. This one here goes into the pump. The one on the rear is a direct fill for the tank. So you can't do a changeover from the rear, all right? So you have to go into here. I already got our line hooked to a hydrant. I already got it charged. We got a firefighter out here flowing water. He's running off tank water, okay? So on this scenario, the tank to pump valve is air actuated. It's a little bit different than what we're used to with brush 7. So you've got to nurse the intake at the same time closing the tank to pump and trying to maintain your discharge pressure. I already have the preset. It's running at 100 psi. So this is how you do it. You slowly start opening your intake valve. Start to see some pressure on your intake gauge. Once you start to see a little bit of pressure coming up, like that, you're going to close your intake, you take the pump valve, open your valve all the way. Okay, so now you've got residual pressure, your tank to pump is closed, you're over what your pressure is, so if you want to maintain that, all you're going to do is control it with your intake valve. Now, with the tank at half full, what I can do is slowly crack my tank fill. While I'm trying to maintain my discharge pressure, a little bit at a time. The governor working, trying to maintain that 100 psi. So now I got the tank slowly filling, tank to pump's closed, with the changeover running off the hydrant pressure. Okay, a couple things keep in mind after you do the stationary pumping, whether you did a hydrant changeover or not, is number one, you want to make sure you take the pressure off the foam side. Number two, when you climb back in the cab, you're going to place your foot on the brake and you're going to disengage your PTO, okay? And that's just a toggle. And then you're going to disengage your fan override switch and you are ready to hit the road. Now we're going to get ready to do the drafting part. Okay, so the basic concept for drafting, you know, it's just like anything else. You want to find a nice level ground if you can to start your drafting operation. You want a good static source. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to mark on scene. You're going to go into neutral. You're going to set your brake. You're going to hit your fan override switch. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do our 360 on the outside, check to make sure everything's closed before we engage the pump. So I'll meet you outside. Okay, so I've chalked my rig first thing when you get out of the cab, and I've pre-connected all 3 lengths of the hard suction hose. And with the new addition that we have is the strainer on the end is a foot valve. So you will not be able to backflow your line. You're going to have to pull a prime through the entire hose when we get the hard suction hooked up to the intake. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the engineer panel. I'm going to do a 360. And what I want to check, just like normal, is to make sure that everything's closed. Okay? I want to make sure all your valves are closed. And we're going to walk around. We're going to check the rear. Make sure valves are all closed. Check this side. Make sure your intake, your discharge cross-lay valve is closed. Make sure both your bumper lines are closed. Down is closed. Down is closed. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close my tank to pump valve because I don't want to drain the tank whenever I open this intake. My firefighter is going to help me get the hose into the tank, and then we're going to hook up to our intake and pull a prime. Okay, you want to cut that in? Again, want to make sure you have at least 24-inch clearance around your port, whether you're in a lake, stream, pool, whichever. You want to try to keep it as clean as possible. And when this comes out, you're going to pull a little bit of water out of the system. Check to make sure that your gaskets are in place. You saw that there was a rock strainer right there. It's very important to have. I'm going to close my tank pump valve. You want to make sure your transfer valve is in volume, which is capacity for a Darling. Now we are ready to engage the pump. I'm going to climb back into the cab. You're going to put your foot on the brake. You're going to flick the toggle switch up on the console. Exit the cab. And we're going to pull prime. Okay, now I got a good prime. RPM move. Okay, lastly we're going to show you is how to use the portable pump to fill the brush truck. Okay, remember this is up top side in a center coffin. It's a very tight configuration up there, and in there is the 10-foot hard suction hose with the foot valve that's already in place, which means that foot valve is only going to allow water to flow one way. So we put it in our water source. Remember, 24 inches around. On the end of our hard suction, we have an adapter, because this is pipe thread, this is national hose. So you have to have the adapter on the hose. You're going to hook it to the inlet side of your pump. Tighten it down. Then on the outlet side of the pump, you're going to put your hand primer on. And the intent is, because this is a single stage centrifugal pump, you have to prime it. So once you get that tight, you're going to slowly pull prime. So we got a prime pulled up to the pump, And then we hooked our line up, as you can see. It goes to the rear of the brush truck. And remember, that rear intake is a direct fill to the pump, or to the tank, excuse me. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna fire up our little pump. And now we're filling with the portable pump through the direct fill on the rear. Remember, that's an 80 PSI, 80 GPM, Honda 2.5 four-stroke gasoline engine. So it takes straight gas in the top, and it's got an oil reservoir for you to check. So it'll take a little while. Remember, it's a 500-gallon tank, but in the field, this works great for if you got a little creek or a little stream or something that is a distance away from the brush truck. You can run some hoses up to it to get a fill. That concludes the operation of filling brush truck with the portable pump. Okay, a couple of things while we're sitting here. We want to keep in mind that, you know, this thing is equipped with lots of different lights for you to do your work. One of the things you want to keep in mind is right here you got a fog light switch that's out in the bumper for driving. The other thing is it has a body light switch here. So red is toggled this way and white is toggled back. So when you're on scene and you're doing work at night, the red lights, which are all LED, all of the cabinets have LED lights. This will actually turn the lights to red. If your work, just regular work in the evenings or after, you know, not on the line, and you need white lights to see anything, the toggle back will be for that application. You also have work lights all along your controller here with your code 3 driving, and it also has the floodlights on the front and the back. So you'll just have to play with it and understand a little bit of you know which switch is for what. Okay, another thing to keep in mind is your water level. You have a LED light that controls your reading for your water level here, as well as out at the engineer panel. You can see it's really bright, and so a safety feature that they have put in is that when you're driving, so let me show you what happens when you disengage the brake. As if you're driving down the road, the light will shut off while you're driving. Okay, but once you re-engage your brake and you're set, then the light's going to come back on. It's just to prevent you from getting obstructed while you're driving. It's a safety thing. So that's a quick down and dirty cover for components in the cab.